Okay, thanks everybody. As Rachel said, I'm Principal Scientist for Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium. This is actually a program of Healthy Land and Water being the regional NRM body for Southeast Queensland. So we are a bit unique in that the program is statewide, but we're based at the regional body. That's another discussion for another time if anyone's interested in how we managed to snaffle that one. But it's a really privileged position to be in. So certainly want to recognise the role of Healthy Land and Water there. Okay, of course, I pay my respects to the First Nations on the lands that we are all on today, where we live and work, and to the elders past, present and emerging, and in particular to the role of First Nations in nurturing the Australian landscape and how much we have to learn. So I'd like to start by recognising our partners. The Consortium is started in 1998, so it's I think the oldest known program in terms of Western fire management of its kind in Australia, recognising all the local governments and SEQ, NRM regions, Queensland, so all of the regional bodies, Queensland Government, the Australian Government, Powerlink, SEQ Water and several state agencies, including Queensland Fire and Emergency Services and Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service. There's no way we could do it without them, and the whole point of this is to be tenure blind and collaborative, so we bring stakeholders together to better achieve what we're trying to do across the landscape at both the private landholder and the public land manager or professional stakeholder level. So a bit like what Amanda said before, I'm not telling you here anything you don't already know. Of course, I think that there has been an increased appreciation of the role of fire in the Australian landscape, certainly from when I started working. We better understand the threat of climate change now, the increase, and the people understand the nuance with fire weather, I think is really important. Massive increase in the pressure on landholders, managers, emergency services, more of a focus on the importance of privately owned land, and increased in the understanding of the value and the practices for First Nations and the importance of resilient communities. But if we're sitting here in this role trying to improve the outcomes for fire preparedness and fire management in the landscape, both in terms of community and biodiversity, then we need to understand how we best engage with our stakeholders to improve these factors and reduce risk. And the way we really need to do that is to identify who are our stakeholders. It's all well and good to go, all stakeholders are emergency response, or stakeholders are local government, or stakeholders are parks. But at the end of the day, it's everyone invested. And therefore, this includes private landholders, who include the majority of our bushland, but are, I guess, until recent times, largely overlooked. And even now, I think it's one of those things that we keep pushing for, that understanding and that better connection and engagement with community and private landholders. The Consortium, we have a varied and diverse role after 25 years. Overall, we're looking to provide a coordinated response and best practice recommendations for fire management, fire ecology and biodiversity conservation. And we do this through a number of tiers, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we are seeking to bridge that gap between research, practitioners and community for the improved fire preparedness and management across the landscape. So we have 4 primary tiers of delivery: training and information, which includes workshops, fire information nights, which will be my focus today; applied research, which includes things like our fire science reference group and a scholarship; representation and advice, which is where we will, for instance, submit a Royal Commission submission on behalf of all of our partners, because we are non-government and I can put a hat on and say stuff that they can't say, basically. So we provide that coordinated response, legislative changes, briefs on any of the Commission findings, things that come out, that sort of thing. And then, of course, networks and collaboration, which I think exceeds in terms of what partners value the most. It's this, it's the people, it's the connecting and it's the understanding and those conversations. So we've been doing this for a while. This is already out of date, but more recently we had some success with the Bushfire Recovery Project, which is very aligned with what Amanda was saying, because that funding came out of DOR in the federal government, which is focused on biodiversity. But then we also had success with Black Summer, which is a very community focused, and that's where that a lot of that investment dollar that you can see there is tied up with those 2 projects. So we do an awful lot with our small little gang of very dedicated people. But today I just really want to touch on the private landholder capacity building, which is largely fire management planning workshops and some survey results. The tailored partner engagement, that's around local government utilities, all the logos you saw on the screen. That's different because obviously their experiences are different, their expertise is different. So we tailor it. That's another presentation that I'd be really happy to share, but it includes basically these three areas: education, engagement, and partnerships. So for instance, things like the training course, you can see a flyer here for overall field hazard assessment training. We've been running this for 12 years. I keep waiting for it not to fill, and every year, we've got a wait list. It's just amazing. So we do things like that, fire weather, we do a fire science forum, we have training, other training, we have publications, we have resource documents. We work in partnership with others like parks. We just help them update their plan burn guide for SEQ and dashboard guides with QFES. So we really try to think about what is the suite of tools and resources that our sector stakeholders need. Applied research, which I briefly described, and then representation, which I described already. Just quickly so you can get a see, we've been doing this for a little bit of time. We've got big increase in partners over the years, which, as Rachel said before, is the reason why we expanded just pre-COVID into moving out of SEQ officially, which was done in partnership with NRM Regions Queensland, because we're getting so many requests to do work out of the region. We really needed our name to better reflect that. But as you can see here, the longevity of partners is super important. And the key strengths is the top thing that people, along with other things, the thing that people really value is everyone else. And of course, I'd like to recognise the important role of First Nations. We work closely with Quandamooka, Kabi, and now, and I think this will be another really great presentation, Indigenous-led township fire management strategies, which was developed by Kayak on Minjerribah and has been an award-winning process. Kayak have given us permission to roll this strategy out in partnership with other First Nations groups, which we're doing with Githable in Southwest, and having discussions at the moment up in Central Queensland, and we're doing that through Black Summer. So if you're interested in that, we'd be more than happy to come and talk to you about that another time. Yeah, that's really exciting. Okay, so back to private landholders. So FMP, fire management planning workshops. Oh, and I should say, these workshops have been recognised by IGEM in their 2018 report, and we also got awarded a Resilience Queensland award a couple of years ago for them as well, because I guess we try to do what we're all trying to do, bring everyone together. So we facilitate it. We pull together, you can see QFES delivering Prepare, Act, Survive there. We bring them together with local government and then whoever else is relevant for the evening. So the fire information evening is like an introduction. If you'd like to do a workshop, we'd love to have you, but you've got to start here. Sometimes we do it combined, but to be honest, this is the better way, because this is really non-threatening. People sometimes get very overwhelmed with the idea of planning for disaster management on their properties, understandably. So this is a good general introduction. Everybody talks. We try not to make it death by PowerPoint, but everyone gets a turn. So local government talk about what they're doing. QFES do Prepare, Act, Survive, and now the new fire danger rating system. We will do a presentation called Fire in the Landscape, which is the sort of fire ecology and fire management 101. And then we will bring in First Nations and parks, main roads, utilities, etc., depending on what the issues are. And this is, like I said, the precursor then to the workshop. At the workshop, it's very hands-on, it's very practical. All our landholders get a map. I mean, here they were AE3 maps, but we're now just starting a process of working at much bigger maps, so people can then put the map up in their shed or their laundry and have it as a tool. But the idea is they get a map, they'll get an aerial, for instance, it'll have contours, and it'll have obviously the infrastructure that's on their property, and then they get a whole series of other maps, like, for instance, broad veg groups, fire history, fire risk class, and they'll transpose the information onto their original aerial to build themselves a plan. And that plan will identify key assets, that what is on their property already, what work do they want to do? Is there for instance, is there a fire trail that needs to be upgraded? Is there a patch of vegetation they really care about, they want to keep fire out of? Do they have grazing paddocks? You know, what's the mix of confluence of issues on their property? So it's a very heavy mapping exercise. It takes a full day. And with it comes a workbook where they sort of track what they're doing, as well as plan out what they want to do, what the time frame of that might be, and the dollars associated with it. So it's a really rigorous process, and that's why we like to have the fire information nights first. But in saying that, we've got a bunch of partners who are happy to combine it, and we just sort of do the fire information session as the morning and then mapping in the afternoon. So we really tailor it to what people need, because they don't always have. If you're working with big landholders, they just don't always have that time to give up, and we'd rather combine it and make sure it suits people, like fit for purpose, than push something that's going to push people away. So yeah, we're as flexible as we can be. Snapshot here, pre-COVID, 50 workshops and community information events, over at 1,200 attendees, participants, 20 partner organisations, 11 local government areas. That's sort of, captured in that time frame. We had a slowdown in COVID, but then we had Black Summer and everything just exploded. So, we had 150 people at the Brisbane Fire Information Night after Black Summer, which is not a massive surprise, I suppose, but gives you an idea of the interest that we get. So just quickly, a couple of survey results. We did this a few years ago now, looking at, just to better understand how we can tailor these workshops, what is it that stops people from doing things? And I thought perhaps it would be skills, time or money. And skills are certainly up there, but it's a lack of knowledge, which is really validating when you're trying to work with people to build capacity and preparedness. That's nearly the perfect result for us. Those other things, are there, and it's important to recognise them, but the lack of knowledge and skills was really validating. So this figure here, we asked people before and after the workshop how they ranked, how they saw their knowledge, which is important, right? Because that's knowledge equals confidence and capacity and willingness to be involved. So, we have the moderates sticking the same, but we have 35% of people saying poor, and afterwards we don't have anyone saying poor, which is what you want, obviously, but over 40% of people saying good, and a few people saying very good, which is great, because you want this to be the start of their journey, where they then work with their brigade or their local government or their partners, their stakeholder partners, to sort of continue this work. Then we asked them a more specific question around their understandings of the concept of a recommended fire regime. So you'll all be familiar with that concept, broad veg groups. It can go right down to what we call regional ecosystems in Queensland. What do we recommend for the fire regime in terms of timing, severity, coverage and time of year as well? How intense is this? What's the recommendation for this veg group? So we look at that in the workshops, because we get people to break their properties into their different veg groups, either broadly or REs, depending on how big the property is. And so that's a really important concept that we talk about. Grasses, we burn frequently. Rainforest, we don't burn at all. And then there's everything in between. So before the workshop, we had 20% of people after who understood this concept. And afterwards, we had 80. I was so pleased to see that these ideas, and this, coming back to Amanda's talk, this mix of bringing in the value of the biodiversity, the value of the landscape into their fire management planning, because this will help improve what you're doing, look after your property. We understand the benefits to people's health as well. So, so that was really valuable as well. So then, just to summarise, it's understanding this knowledge, turning it in, looking at it via engagement and synthesis of what we already know, what we're learning, turning this into action on the ground or working with people, and assessment to review and improve this process. And sort of going on from there, at perhaps another opportunity, what is the SEQ Bushfire Recovery Project would be a really good way to talk about how we then take that to on ground. So this is all about capacity building and preparedness. But the next level, of course, is people doing these works on ground with funding. If it's come from the Australian government or the state government, that is, you will know there are requirements around how this rolls out. So this project's been really great for us. It's initiated the subcatchment fire management plans, which, as the name suggests, sit as a subcatchment level rather than the property level. And Black Summer has been, as I said before, initiated the permission from First Nations for us to use the township fire management strategies. So they're sort of the next steps. we'd be really thrilled to share those with you at another time. And thank you very much.